Hi, it's Dr. Steve from Misericordia University, and welcome to Objective Formulation. And this is part of our graduate course, Principles of Instructional Design at Misericordia University. In this short video, let's consider how to write objectives that will be specific, measurable, attainable, and realistic. And then let's finish by looking at putting everything together in terms of the high-level design document. The formulation of objectives as performed for a lesson plan in a classroom is going to be slightly different than what we do as instructional designers as we're preparing training. As you looked at your task analysis, you're going to find that there are some either major steps or clusters of activities. Write an objective for each major step of the task analysis. When you were looking at the task analysis and determined entry behaviors, one objective might be simply to review a prerequisite knowledge before the learners can go on to actually go through successfully this training. Realize also that when you formulate objectives, that may cause you to go back to your task analysis and do a little revising there. And that's okay. That's quite normal. Realize that instructional design is a dynamic process. When you are designing your performance objectives for training, consider using the SMART guidelines proposed by Doran, Miller, and Cunningham. By SMART, we mean, are they specific? Are you providing the who, what, when, where, and under what conditions within your objectives? Are they measurable? Are they going to be attainable given the resources and the constraints within which you're working? Are they realistic? Can you actually expect to meet the goals that you're setting forth? And also, what's the timeline associated with meeting those goals? One method or template that you could use in writing performance objectives for training would be the ABCD method. A is for audience. Specify who is the learner, and here focus on the individual learner. The behavior. So what specific, observable, measurable behavior will be performed and specified in this one particular objective? Then think about the condition and specify it. Under what specific conditions can you expect that behavior to be performed? And also, to which degree? What percentage or degree of accuracy will that behavior be performed? In general, make sure that your objectives specify observable behaviors. State what the learner is going to be able to do, and we're not talking about the instructor, but rather the learner. If you're a classroom teacher, this will sound very familiar. Remember to use action verbs when you're writing performance objectives, and avoid the use of verbs such as understand or appreciate or believe or feel or know, because we can't directly observe those and measure those. But if you use verbs such as the student will adjust or build or categorize or choose or circle or any of these kinds of words, those will be specific, they're defined, they're measurable, and they will go into creating better performance objectives. Let's look at two examples. First, take a look at the objective that's written here. Who is the audience? It's the 8th grade student. Notice I'm specifying student singular. What's the behavior? The student will demonstrate the proper use of acronyms by spelling out the acronyms the first time they're used in a technical document. Again, very specific behavior. Condition. Given a one-page document to edit, and this document contains 3 different acronyms, again, very specific conditions under which the designer is going to be able to assess whether or not this objective has been completed and attained. And what's the degree of acceptable performance? In this case, 100% accuracy. And one more example. When we look at this objective, who's the audience? It's the sophomore student. What's the behavior? They will identify a given element as a metal or a non-metal. Again, very specific, very defined, very narrow. This is what those learners will do. Under what conditions? The learner will be given a periodic table. What's the degree of performance? 90% accuracy. Now realize that, and if you're a classroom teacher, you know that it's unrealistic to expect 100% accuracy from all of your learners. However, if we're in a training situation and we're looking at something like CPR or other kind of medical or safety training, hazmat training and things of this nature, where the learner will be certified at the end of the training, maybe less than 100% accuracy will not be acceptable. But other than conditions like that, you probably do not want to commit yourself to 100% accuracy, because really this will be kind of like terms of a contract, if you will, with the company or the school and those learners with whom you're working. So don't overcommit yourself and be unrealistic about their degree of acceptable performance. Another thing to consider as you're writing your objectives is the way that people learn. We start, as described by Bloom's taxonomy, and this is the revised taxonomy, we start by remembering and recalling and recognizing something. And then the learner understands something. Then they can apply and go further, analyze, evaluate, and ultimately even create, develop some kind of product. So when we look at objectives, think about this way of graduating what they learn and what they can do. So that means, again, to a classroom teacher, this will probably not be new, that we start off with an objective that reflects the remembering level, and then an objective that reflects the understanding level. And again, under training, we're probably going to go as high as the application, the applying level. As you are writing objectives for your training, here are some verbs that you could use related to the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Start off with an objective that calls for some basic level understanding of the content. At the remembering level, maybe ask students to define or recall or identify or just recognize some elements of content. After you test students at that level, let's get them to the next highest level in Bloom's. Let's ask them to understand something. So in those objectives, you could utilize verbs like have students describe something, or rephrase something, or put it in their own words, or explain something. After that level, you could, in training, go to the level of application. So ask students to apply this content, this knowledge in some way. Ask them to classify something. Ask them to employ or solve or write an example or create a chart of something. If you recall the Dick and Carey model of instructional design, at this point, after you have written your performance objectives, now it's time to write your assessment items. Not that you cannot refine the assessment items later on, but write some basic assessment items at this point. And in doing this, you're going to focus your instruction to ensure that what you have set out to do, that you're truly going to assess and look for assessing that particular set of behaviors. For example, here we have the overall goal of training. And then we're looking at the elements of the task analysis. We want them to write the name of a compound, write the name of an ionic, and then write the name of something else. Based on that, we're going to write instructional objectives, and here they are, using the ABCD method. And then here are the assessment or evaluation items. Again, not that you cannot refine them later, but you get the basics down right now to keep yourself on track, to ensure that what you're teaching and setting out to teach, and what you want the learners to gain out of this training module, that indeed you're going to be assessing those very same things. As a review, at this point you are ready to write the objectives based on your task analysis. Go back to the task analysis, look for the major steps versus the sub-steps, or major clusters, depending what type of analysis you performed. Now take a better look at that and determine which items are prerequisite to training, which are required, and also of the prerequisites, which items might the learners already come in with and already know, and which may have to be reviewed or covered in some way. Then write an objective for each major step of the task analysis. The next step is, your task may be so complex, you may want to break this into several modules of training. Determine how much material will belong in a single module of instruction. And remember that this is going to be part of formulating the high-level design document. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And then out of this, we're going to develop a prototype module of instruction. Keep in mind that maybe you will not be teaching the entire task for that one module of instruction. Let's wrap up today's class by putting it all together. Let's look at wrapping up the high-level design document. To review the assessment plan for our course, the course calls for a final project to make up 40% of the grade, and then the hands-on interactive and remote activities 60%. Of the final project 40%, half of the grade will come from the high-level design document, and the other half will come from the application, the development of an instructional module, a prototype of instruction that's based on your design document. Looking a little deeper, here is the grading specifically for the high-level design project and the specific grading points for the instructional prototype. In Blackboard, you'll be able to find a rubric that will reflect this. The high-level design document, we also call the front-end analysis, should be a professional-looking document in which you're going to present, you're going to justify and demonstrate your systematic design, and in the process, in quotes, sell your training module, which in some cases may actually be truly selling. We're going to create a document that has 5 sections. Each section will begin on a separate page. The only section we did not describe so far, because you cannot do it until you're finished with all the other sections, is an executive summary. We'll discuss that in a moment. It's going to be a 1 to 2 page overview of this whole project. Then your needs assessment, that's where you introduce the problem. Again, started on a new page. Your learner analysis. So here you're analyzing the learners and you're looking at the implications for training. Your task analysis, that's where you're analyzing the task you're going to teach. And that's not only going to show the thoroughness of your training, but it's going to ensure that you really are thorough with everything that you're going to teach. And then your objectives. What will the learners be able to do very specifically at the completion of training? Let's talk about the executive summary for a moment. The executive summary is always the very first section of any project document that you're going to do, and it's no different in instructional design. This is designed for a busy executive or administrator who doesn't want to look at all of the particular sections of your document, but wants to get the overview. So it should be thorough, but short and to the point. So make it 1 to 2 pages maximum. It should provide all of the essential information for that busy person who's not going to read that whole document. Make it succinct, make it to the point, and bullets are a very acceptable way with a little bit of narrative to lead into what these things are all about. I'm going to quickly review the other sections for this high-level design document. This week, start wrapping that up, and next week, I'll ask you to submit the high-level design document for assessment purposes. The needs assessment, remember that that's where you're going to describe the need for training or the problem. You're going to select one strategy, discrepancy, input-output, or cost-benefit analysis. And then you're going to present any kind of research or data or information that's going to support the fact that training is needed in this particular case. The learner analysis section, you'll recall, we provide a general description or the characteristics of that group of learners. We describe strengths, weaknesses, and any areas of potential difficulty, and based on that, the designer delineates some potential strategies to use within instruction based on all that they know about the learners. In the task analysis section, maybe start with a brief paragraph that describes what the task analysis is and its purpose, and then illustrate, which could be in flowchart form or the different ways you have already prepared your task analysis. Indicate the major tasks and subtasks or components of the content and organize them in some way so that you as the designer of the training module and the person you're trying to sell this to, that they'll understand what the task is fully encompassing. Finally, your last section will be the objectives. Again, start it on a separate page, label it as objectives, and then list several objectives for the training module using the ABCD method. Consider building the objectives on Bloom's taxonomy, realizing that learners start at the low end and then they start to move up and progress until, again, for training purposes, we move 3 steps. We move through the application stage that the learner can actually apply what he or she is learning. So to pull it all together, the first several weeks of this semester, we looked at the high-level design document, and that consists of all the portions that we described, and we looked at how to accomplish each of them individually. Now it's time to pull all of those together into one document, create the executive summary. Next week, I will ask you to finalize that document and submit it for assessment, and then let's start using this design document to help inform the prototype, the instructional module that we're going to create. At next week's class, we will focus completely on the design of instruction, embedded assessment, making it an active, interactive activity for the learners, and everything dealing with creating the instructional prototype. One final thought, just keep in mind that your instructional goals might entail developing ultimately several instructional modules. For the sake of our project in this course, you will develop one module of training. So don't look to tackle everything, and don't let the size and the scope of the task that you're going to teach, don't be deterred on focusing on that. Realize you can teach one part of that as this prototype. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you in class.